You just let me know when you want to start, and I'll be happy to start.
Recording in progress.
Excuse me, I have been up all night, so. All right, we will convene the pre-meeting of the Planning Commission, West Jordan, for August 16th, 2022. And all commissioners are present. First off, we will do training with Denise. Do you want to explain what your title is and everything, or? I don't know if it's changed, so.
I'm the Administrative Services Director for the city.
Has changed, see?
It has. We've expanded a little bit. IT, Human Resources are now, and the City Recorder's Office now report to me. And Finance and Budget and Treasury and Utility Billing and whatever else, anything numbers related or service related comes through my department. So tonight I've been asked to join you for a little bit to kind of explain impact fees. So we're going to kind of go through what impact fees are, where the city stands with impact fees, our current status. But that will go pretty quickly. But then what I'm going to do is kind of talk to you about how land use and how changes in land use and some of the applications you hear really impact impact fees in the city and our capital facilities plans and those kinds of things. Because I think you need to be cognizant when you make those decisions. Sometimes we make them in a bubble and we don't understand all the consequences that those decisions are. So, open discussion, ask me or interrupt me at any time, and we can have a good discussion. Maybe. There we are. Oh, now we got to go back. All right, so impact fees, what are they? They are a necessary evil, according to the developer's side and the city side, right? Developers hate impact fees. They've been blamed for the housing crisis. They've been blamed for residents not wanting new development. I mean, there's just all kinds of turmoil regarding impact fees all the time. But they are a critical resource for the city and for local government to ensure that development pays for itself on the outset. And then regular fees like property tax should take over to pay for those regular services. So there are payments required from new developers or development to provide new or expanded public capital facilities needed to serve that development. So a for instance would be right now fire stations, right? We have 4 fire stations and we're going to need a 5th. Because of new development. If we didn't have new development, if we were built all the way out, we wouldn't need that fire station. So therefore, why should the residents that are currently existing in the city have to pay for a 5th fire station if they didn't need it? That wasn't a demand from from their existence in the city. So new development will continue to pay for a new fire station and for the construction of the actual physical facility of the fire station. It will not pay for the staffing of the fire station. We've had some new law occur, well, not new law, new interpretation of the law that will allow the purchase of the initial equipment that serves the fire station only. That can be paid for with impact fees. So if we were to buy a fire engine, fire truck, ladder truck, the large capital equipment, that can be purchased. That's one of the few instances that equipment will be included in an impact fee purchase. For the most part, they're physical facilities. So they're water distribution lines, water storage tanks, detention basins, roads, those kinds of things. The impact fees that West Jordan assesses, each city assesses different impact fees based on their build out and based on their demands and based on the service levels that they provide. We're a full service city, so we do assess all of the impact fees that are eligible at this point. So roads, water, sewer, stormwater, police, fire, and parks. Parks is assessed only on residential development. So you kind of got to keep parks in mind here, right? If it's only assessed on residential development and you have an application come to you that says, I want to change commercial to residential, there's an increased demand on a park that was not originally included in the calculation of the park impact fee, right? Go the opposite way. Take a residential development and turn it into commercial. And you had a calculation and an assessment for a park that may have already even been built that now will not be collected. So all of these land use decisions that you make impact directly the impact fees and how we build and develop and are able to pay for some of that infrastructure over time. So how are impact fees used? We've already talked about that for a minute. They're used for physical infrastructure like roads, parks, water storage, water distribution, pump stations, transmission lines, large ones, detention basins, sewer treatment plant. The expansion of the South Valley Water Reclamation Facility was funded by a bond that is paid directly by the impact fees that we collect. Fire stations, fire trucks. Police, it would not be any of the equipment for the police, like police cars, but it would be for their police station. So a substation would be an option for an impact fee reimbursement. You're fine.
So now, when she's talking about impact fees being collected for roads, for instance, if you approve a 100-lot subdivision, the roads within that subdivision are required to be built by the developer and dedicated to the city. So the impact fees aren't paying for those. What it's paying for instance, is the increased width of 7800 South or 90th South or I don't believe
The
Bangor, Ohio,
arterials.
the arterial collector streets that lead to that subdivision. And so don't think that the impact fees are paying for those roads. If the developer wants to build those houses, they need to build the way to get to it. But the city can't make them build anything beyond the boundary of that subdivision. That's what the impact fees are for, so.
Very good distinction. Sure. Mr. Shelton?
What about, say, a sewer? What about like a sewer line within a subdivision? Is it the same as a road?
That's the
They
same
would pay
thing.
for that
The
also?
developer's required to put in some of the like the individual water infrastructure, sewer infrastructure,
Power.
distribution lines, power, all of those things. Everything that's within the infrastructure or within the development's boundaries are paid for by the developer. But how they connect to or require, we have these large distribution lines for sewer that go down 90th South and 78th, I believe there's a large one. How we get that sewer to the treatment plant, there may need to be an expansion, right? When you go from single family and upsize to high density or low density to high density, that has a direct impact on the infrastructure that's needed that carries the majority of the service levels. So not the individuals, but the service level of the city as a whole.
Just because I'm curious, another
Yeah,
question.
no?
Let's say a new subdivision goes in and a upgraded power grid is needed that's outside of the subdivision. The city isn't over the power. Is there a portion of the impact fee that goes toward upgrading power? How does that work?
There is not. And I'm not aware of how Rocky Mountain Power works through that. Are you, Scott? Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know. I worked in Murray before I came here, and they have their own power, but we didn't assess a power impact fee. To be quite candid, okay, good. The electrician can answer it.
I happen to know an electrician that knows that. So when commercial properties get power put in there, the power company has an initial fee they charge, and then they deduct what that costs to get the power to it by how much they estimate their bill is going to be for the next year. They deduct that off of what that total cost is to get the power to that building. So, and they take into account other things to get that power there too. So they pay for it directly to the power company.
And the power companies are quite profitable.
If you don't pay, you don't get it.
That's right.
So to kind of sum up, these developers are asked to pay, I can't even talk, pay for their proportionate share. So oftentimes, if we have a subdivision and we do need a system improvement, they will upsize, and if they need a 10-inch line, sometimes we run our models and say, hey, you'll pay for the 10-inch, but we need it actually a 12-inch. And the city actually goes in and pays for that upsizing. Now, there are other situations where other developers, they'll enter into a pioneering agreement and they'll recoup the cost that way as well. So there's a lot that goes into it, though.
There's a lot of accounting to impact fees, quite candidly. We have to take every project and assess whether there is an impact from new development, and we take a portion of that project if it's eligible and been identified in the impact fee study, and we take a portion of impact fees to pay for that project. So exactly what Scott was saying. There's also times when a developer is the first one in, right? And they're paying for a lot of the development costs up front, and we enter into an agreement with them that we will reimburse them the cost through our collection of impact fees. Or we will bond for the project and reimburse them and then pay for the bond with impact fees. So there's a lot of financing opportunities with impact fees for us to manage the financial cash flow needed, because quite candidly, a lot of these capital facilities or the physical infrastructure needed to support this development is needed when the first development goes in. That's a challenge. I'm going to show you some balances of what our impact fees were at the end of last year. I haven't done the calculations yet for this year, but you'll see we've got some impact fees that are significantly negative in the millions, right? Which means we've paid or we've used cash from the city to pay for some of that development infrastructure up front. And we are hoping that the calculations are correct, that when development occurs, that we'll have those funds paid back to the city. If they aren't, once development has occurred and it's, all the way, then the city will just have to write that off to whatever the utility is or to the general fund. Some of the current projects that we're doing right now that are 100% impact fee related, these are 100% projects. So these are brand new development projects. This is Maple Hills Park. It's a multi-million-dollar park expansion for the city. Ronwood Park has several phases to it, is paid directly by park impact fees. The new Wheel Park, which is part of Ronwood Park, it's the skate and bike piece of it, is being paid for out of park. It's stormwater impact fees. When you asked about sewer line expansion, Zone 6 sewer line expansion right now is about a $12 million project. Thankfully, we were able to get some state ARPA money to contribute to that project. And we were able to get some federal ARPA money to contribute to that project. And then the rest of it is coming as a loan to the CIP to complete that from the CIP to complete that project. And then annually, the sewer fund will be paying $1 million back to the CIP through impact fee collection, which is about what we collect from the sewer lines. Our Zone 6 water tank storage project. And then one that you're going to see is police and fire. We built Station 54 with our fire impact fees, and we bonded for it in 2013. This is the last year of the bond payment, but the impact fee collection hasn't quite kept up with the bond payment. So some of that is being subsidized right now by the CIP fund. And interest is assessed on any negative values. As of last year, so this will get updated as soon as we finish our audit work, which we're just starting now. But as of last year, we had $7.5 million in road impact fee money. So we could do some road expansion projects, which we've got some major ones going on in the city right now. Part of 1300 West widening, part of 7800 widening. A small portion of those roads will be impact fee related, but a very small portion because most of them were related to our current existent, our current city. Parks, we had almost $10 million, but the large park projects, you kind of keep impact fees for a while so that you collect enough to actually finish the project and don't have to bond and pay interest on them. So Maple Hills Park is about a $4 million project, and the Ron Wood Park is going to take the rest of this money and then some. Our police, you can see it's barely keeping up with the debt service payment, but our fire impact fee did not. What that tells me is that we were not aware of how much actual development was going to occur and be collected when the fire station was bonded for, nor did we have the fee quite right. And that will happen often, right? If you do an impact fee study and you don't do a project for 5 years, think about what a project costs 5 years from now. We're clearly not collecting enough impact fees right now for projects that we know that we're going to be having to develop over the next 2 or 3 years. Our water and sewer funds are both very negative. That has to do with demand. That is the infrastructure that goes in right at the beginning of a development, and you know that. And then stormwater has a decent balance at $5 million, but we've got some large detention basin projects that are going on, one at 8600 South in Mountain View Corridor. One of the rules is we have to spend this within 7 years of collecting it. If we don't, and this has happened to me in another municipality, you have to rebate the developer, not the owner of the home. The developer. Which was interesting because I was having to find developers that had paid in like 2003 and 4 and had just gone through 2008 and no longer existed. So, but it goes back to the developer bottom line. It doesn't matter who owns the home, who owns the property. At no point in time are they eligible for that reimbursement of impact fee money. All right, so land use impacts. I kind of left this slide almost blank just because I thought this would be an open discussion more than anything. We calculate the impact fees once every 3 to 5 years. Our last impact fee study is actually 7 years old, and mostly due to COVID. We were all behind. I mean, we've been running a marathon. And so we have an impact fee study currently going on. It's based on our general plan, which is now being updated. It's based on our master plan and land use, things that you've decided, our current zoning needs, and then it also is based on our capital facilities plan as well. We do that study with an outside firm. While we could do it in-house, we have the skill set to do it. It is best to have it done by a third party because impact fees are often challenged. They're challenged by the Realtors Association often, the Home Builders Association often, the legislature very often. And so we make sure that we have some distance from that calculation. While we are completely involved in providing them information, they are the ones that really provide the report. We expect that report to be back in about 6 months. At no time, no matter what the legislature says, their laws state we cannot waive, the word waive is the piece, we cannot waive impact fees. We have heard over and over and over in the moderate housing and affordable housing discussions, well, cities can just waive those impact fees, right?
There are strategies.
That's
Right from the state of Utah.
Correct.
Strategies they waive.
That's a strategy from the state of Utah. Yet, the law is we cannot waive impact fees for anybody. We can enter into an agreement and pay on behalf of them. So if we say it's in our best interest to have this development here and we see a general benefit and we want to provide an incentive of some sort for this particular type of development and we choose to give them an incentive of an economic development incentive of some sort and pay the impact fees on their behalf. But anytime an impact fee is quote unquote waived, it is required to be paid by the general fund into the impact fee fund. So it is a separate and distinct account. It is interest bearing and it is required. So at no time can we waive those. So that's it for what I had to share with you today. I hope that's helpful, but I would be happy to answer questions about how your decisions might impact fees.
I got one quick question, and this is about redevelopment. and impact fees. So when a developer comes in and I'm gonna take one of our adjoining, well, I won't say adjoining, but other cities that's a little bit further south that's kind of been in the news a lot lately. And they're redeveloping that whole entire,
The prison.
the prison, yes. How does that play a role and how does the cities adopt those impact fees on the redevelopment?
That's a very good question. They're going to take what was the impact of the current facility and then the change in use. It's pretty complicated calculation, but there will be impact fees assessed on that property. The only way that there would not be would be if it was a government, completely government owned. So if the state were to own that property in its entirety and not allow any private development on it.
So where the state is actually selling the property to developers, then that's how they can assess those fees.
Correct. So if, it's likely, right, that high rises are going to go into some of that land, right? Well, that's a completely different use, and that city will be collecting impact fees for arterial roads, for water support infrastructure that might be needed. It'll be interesting to see some of those calculations because, like water, for instance, I'm not sure, right? There's pretty high demand for the original use, so it might not be a ton of impact fees, but there will be some collection.
That's the extreme example, right? But we do give credits, even, on the east side especially, as we have redevelopment or reuse. When we have a new use, we compare the old use versus the new use, and then we either give credit or assess the difference, and so that's a practice that we've had for a very long time.
It'll be similar to when the property across the street is changed, right?
I was gonna bring that up.
Sure, yeah. There will definitely be impact fees related to that, depending on who develops and what they develop.
And the assessment fees can only be changed every 7 years, or can that be changed annually?
The impact fees actually, it's similar to our capital facilities plan. They really should be looked at every year, right? Because inflation happens so quickly. The capital facilities plan itself needs to change very quickly. And we need the decisions that have gone on in the past year that might impact the future. So yes, they should be looked at every year.
Does our city do it annually, or
We wish.
we wish?
It would require additional staffing. It's very difficult to stay up with those plans.
It seems like would be behind the 8 ball no matter what.
Yeah.
Even if you did it annually, you're still gonna be behind.
You will still be behind. You're right, 100%. We do our best, but all of those plans are currently being updated right now. So we're pretty excited to be able to have clearer plans, more accurate plans, and updated costs.
Commissioner Hatch has got a
It's
question for
another
you.
bizarre question. Does the federal government pay impact fees?
No.
I think they don't. So that big NSA building that they built out there was no benefit to the city, but it is a draw on their resources.
Correct.
That's a
Okay,
good question.
thank you.
With the, I guess I've got two questions. I'm trying to think of how to phrase them. I guess first, at what point and during development is the fee determined, and then at what point is it assessed?
Good question. It's actually at the permitting point. So they pay it with their building permit.
So for something, one of these major developments that we have out on the west side, we go through that entire process and a fee is assessed, and then they come back 4 or 5 years later and say, this commercial area isn't going to sell quite right. We've got to go residential. That's where we need to be cognizant that we're not going to recover additional fees at that point.
Well, I don't believe that they pay their permitting fee until they're ready to actually develop.
So impact fees, the only one that is collected with the recording of the subdivision plat is the stormwater impact fee. Everything else, police, road, fire, parks, is only collected with that individual building permit. And so you could have, say, a 100-lot subdivision that could go years of a slow economy. And so and as Denise has said, that's the reason that the impact fees always fall behind because, if in a perfect world, if everything was built out in 6 months, it'd be golden, but, that doesn't happen. And so, but the only thing we can collect up front is the stormwater impact fee. And that's only at the plat recording, so.
Do they pay the impact fee at the time that permitting is done based
With the
on what
building
was
permit.
initially proposed?
It's
or-
what is in our current impact fee or fee
Okay.
schedule. So, yeah, if the subdivision was approved 15 years ago, they don't pay the impact fee 15 years ago, they
Yeah.
pay it today's rate, so.
Perfect. Second question is, at what level, is there a level where impact fees don't, for example, tonight we're talking about one lot that's getting subdivided into two. Is that an impact fee? Or it's at least looked at?
It is.
Okay.
Yes, with that building permit, they will pay those impact fees, so.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So this is, I don't know, anecdotal information. I think Denise mentioned that impact fees have often recently been blamed for the housing crisis and the high cost of homes and things like that. One thing that the Utah League of Cities and Towns has asked its member cities is to do an analysis, really, report an average cost of impact fees or permit fees related to single-family homes, multifamily dwellings, those types of things. So this is just an average, of course. It varies based on the size of the home, and there's the valuation, right? But Doug and Larry worked on these numbers, and Doug Ralph, by the way, is our building official. And for a single-family home, the average permit cost, including the impact fees, is around $15,000. So just put that into perspective on the total cost of a home. Anyway, we're just trying to recoup the impact to our community, so the residents that live here aren't having to shoulder all that new growth. Townhomes or duplexes average about 10,000 per unit with impact fees and permit application fees. So total, yeah. So anyway, you can file that away as you have different conversations, as you interact with other colleagues. Those are our numbers right now, so.
That's true.
Commissioner Wynn?
Do you compare impact fees with other cities to see if they're competitive?
Yes and no, right? I mean, it would not be best practice for us because clearly the needs for each cities are completely different, right? How far have they already built? If they've already expanded certain arterials to manage that growth from their previous impact fee collection, the future impact fee won't cover it. That honestly, for the last 20 years that I've been doing this, that has often been a reference. They'll say, well, they'll go to another city if the impact fee is less expensive and we don't want to lose this developer or development. And so often the council has to weigh when they're adopting the fee, when the study is presented to them and they need to adopt a fee, it often occurs that a council will reduce the fee based on other cities, or that they feel like it's an undue burden on the developer. It's not best practice. It's why you end up going in the hole. So I would strongly discourage comparison. Other comparisons are great, right? Water rate fees, sewer rate fees, even some of the services that we provide, we do a comparison. And not so much that we're in competition with another city, but we want to be fair and reasonable. And if we're kind of outside the bounds, we'll call cities and network and say, why are we different? Or why is this different? Impact fees is one of those things that you are going to have a huge difference on. And so I would strongly discourage it. Thank you.
Follow-up question. Does the city employ a psychologist to help you maintain your sanity? 'Cause
Does
this
the
is
city
crazy.
what? The mental health program that the police department have. I know. Yeah, it's impact fees are a lot. They are. They could have several full-time people dedicated to only the maintenance of impact fees. Thanks for asking that, though.
So, maybe a quick question for Scott. We talked, it's been probably a year. I'm thinking post-impact fees. And you shared with me a statistic that I don't quite remember, but it was after impact fees are long gone and we've got a development in place, there's a certain acreage per lot that really starts to pay for itself through taxes into the city. What could you share with us what that was, roughly?
Wow. Yeah, that's a fair question, and we can circle back, but there's a lot of variables, but there are a lot of different nationwide studies, and again, it depends on the extent of your infrastructure. But I think that's to Larry's point. I think we could maybe bring that up at your next meeting or next training meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, Denise.
That was great.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
All right.
Done that sooner. That was very helpful.
Yeah. It is now 6 o'clock, so we'll convene our meeting. All commissioners are present, and we will start. First item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from July 19th. Do I have a motion? I move that we approve. Oh,
Second?
okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, carries 7-0. Next is a public hearing with final action by the Planning Commission for the Jones Estate subdivision at 7553 South, 2700 West, preliminary subdivision plat. 2 lots on a .66 acres R1-10D zone. And it looks like John Miller, come on up and hit the right button on the lectern and, yep. And I guess
You
pull
hear
up
me?
your stuff, yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm just, I'm sure you guys are already aware, we're trying to create one large lot that's kind of been like a rural kind of farmland type lot to 2 single-family homes, kind of essentially completing the neighborhood where you pull in. We think that it'll be a nice completion, beneficial to the community. She just wants to stay. She's spent her entire life there, raised her family, has her lifelong friends, and she wants to build a new home to, live out the rest of her years, and she doesn't want to move. So she enjoys the area. She, it's all of her family and friends, and I'm just trying to help her make that happen.
Any questions for the applicant? Nope. Go ahead and have a seat.
Okay.
So we're having some technical difficulties, so.
I can tell.
There we go.
Yeah, it's working now. All right. I can't get my. Boy, there's a demon in the room tonight.
Maybe his name is,
There we go. All right. So, all good, folks. Calm down now. So the planning commission saw this a few months back. It was a zone change for The Jones property right on the corner of 7530 South and 2700 West, they rezoned it from rural residential half acre to an R110, and that matches everything around the property. And as Mr. Miller said, uh, the applicant's desire is to make two lots. One of them's about 12,000 square feet, and the other's just a little bit shy of 16,000, or a little bit over 16,000 square feet. And on lot two, if you've been by there, I believe the barn is gone now. I think it was somebody was tearing it down a couple of months ago, and then I don't know the silos and stuff. They're still there. Used to be owned by the Jones family, who had a dry farm out on the west side, and then they would make their home base here. But she desires to build a home here. So the reason the planning commission is seeing this, because the reason it is a major subdivision, you might be saying, well, this is really small, it's only a lot split. As you can see along 2700 West, which is on the very extreme left of your screen there, there's a small parcel that actually is being used as part of the 2700 West right of way at present, probably in sidewalk or the park strip, but it never has been dedicated to the city. And so with this subdivision, that will be dedicated, and then the city will have full ownership of the right of way at that point. And so staff recommends approval of this simple lot split. Do you have any questions for me?
Commissioner Shelton.
Are you referencing the 33-foot wide strip that's on this?
Yes, it's, let me see if right where my arrow is, it's right. This point, it's
From there to the left or from there
right
to?
on the very left. It says 718 square feet, right on the,
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
yes, so just a very small portion. And that's the only way under West Jordan City Code that a property can be dedicated to a city. The planning commission has to accept that dedication. And then, of course, when this plot's recorded, that's when the dedication will be finalized, so.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, this is a public hearing, so we'll open it up. If you wish to speak, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak. Come on up. Or if you're online, raise your hand on Zoom. And seeing we have no people, okay. We will go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back up to the commission for comment and/or motion.
Based on the information and findings set forth in the staff report, and upon the evidence and explanations received today, I move the planning commission approve the final subdivision plat for Jones Estate, two-lot subdivision located at 7553 South, 2700 West, subject to the following requirements of approval that are contained in the packet.
Commissioner Shelton,
I second that motion.
all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, passes 7-0. Next on our agenda is public hearing with the Planning Commission recommendation to the City Council for final action. It is the text amendment, building height in residential zones, amend the 2009 West Jordan City Code to increase the maximum building height to 35 feet in residential zones, citywide applicability. And Larry?
And so you might be wondering why is the planner looking to raise the heights of buildings? It's simply, as you see in your packet, we passed a new definition, actually went into effect with the passage of Wood Ranch. And what's that been, a year or so ago? We amended a lot of definitions at that time. And the particular reason that the building height definition was amended is if you're on flat ground, there's not a lot of issues. But it's once that you start building on hills or sloped property that building heights become an issue. And we've had this in some instances on properties down by the river bottoms. So, not getting ahead of myself, you can see that the former way we would measure building height, residential building heights, is always to the midpoint of the slope. Now, that was just practice. When I got here, that was the practice. I don't know, Scott, if when you got here, if that was the practice. So it's just been the practice in West Jordan for a long time. Quite frankly, it's a practice of many cities. They just measure to the midpoint of the slope. However, the new definition says the vertical distance under the roof or any roof element to the nearest measure of existing grade. And so what that definition says is everything under the peak, because it's under the roof. It doesn't say midpoint of the slope, it says anything under the roof. The peak is the apex of that, but it's still part of the roof system. Now, and so what that really does is it probably doesn't change a lot of building styles that are going on currently. If this is not approved and it's purely the planning commission's recommendation and the city council's approval, some of the buildings will probably have to be lowered in height. You might think, well, that may be a good thing. Some of you may not like terribly tall buildings. However, 35 feet, that's pretty much the standard anymore on a lot of houses. And so the one place that this really will be helpful is you can see this is the best illustration I could find of a sloped property. So you look at the front of that house, and the way we used to do sloped properties is from the measure of the grade of the road or the sidewalk. So if the front of that house, which is to the right, was to be measured at 35 feet, look how high that would put that at the very back where the property goes on a slope. And there has been some instances in this city where we have 35 feet at the front of the house and probably 50 feet, looking at the Fenway Park wall or, and people that are uphill from it don't care, but the ones that are downhill from it certainly do. And as you can see, then the way this house on a sloping property would be measured is from the existing grade at the back. So it couldn't be any higher than 35 feet, no matter which grade you take. And so if it's a flat piece of property, then you're fine. But where you measure at that downhill side, it can't be higher than 35 feet from that existing grade back there. Now, in Wood Ranch, it has an additional element in the development plan that a lot of properties that are on slopes have to be stepped so that you're not looking at a very straight facade or something. The buildings have to be stepped back. But this is just a good example of why this will help. Now you say, well, you could do that with 30 feet. You certainly could. And so it's really up to you if you want to go up to the 35 feet. And speaking of, comparing other cities, I did. Maybe it's not best practice in measure of height either, but in some cases it just tells you what other communities are doing. South Jordan, Taylorsville, Cottonwood Heights, Sandy, Riverton, Draper, interestingly enough, are all at 35 feet right now. Harriman is at 2 stories or 24 feet. And as I was reading through their code, it was kind of alluding to that they didn't want new development to be overpowering with existing development, but most of Harriman is new development. But anyway, that's their rule. And as you can see, Midvale is 28 feet to the midpoint of the slope. So I can guarantee you they're going to be probably 32, 33 feet anyway. And West Valley's firm with West Jordan at 30 feet. I couldn't tell. It didn't say in their code whether they were to everything under the roof or to the midpoint of the slope. Oftentimes, Midvale's the only one I have ever seen codify that. Most of them, it's just a practice, an administrative practice. And then the tables, of course, are just the bulk tables from the code. It'll be increased in all of these zones from R1, R2, R3, with the exception of the RM. And that is basically used for mobile home parks. And I don't think that it'd be good practice to make anything higher than 30 feet in there. So anyway, that's all I've got on this. You're probably riveting with questions about this, or you may not. So I'm here to answer them.
I have a question. I had to laugh. You have in here very flat ground. And it did make me laugh.
Well,
We have some very flat
what
ground
can
in
I
West
say?
Jordan. That's all. No question. Just a comment about our magical land that we live on. Yes, exactly.
Commissioner Quinney.
Just to make sure, so you were showing on that one that showed all the zonings. You have all of them on there in the packet. We just have R1, R2, R3, RR, RE. We didn't have the R1, 8, 9, 10. And just want to make sure we're
The
doing
R-
all
R1
residential zones,
Yeah,
right?
R1 means all of those from R15 to R114.
Oh, I get. Oh, yeah, I see
Yeah.
what you're saying now. Okay, just want to make sure I was clear on that.
Yeah.
Commissioner Sheldon.
This doesn't really effectively allow people to build taller homes, from what you're saying.
I don't think so because we've been measuring from the midpoint of the slope for so long, and then, it depends on the steepness of the roof. You could be much higher than 35 feet, even at 30 foot.
But if somebody were to say they wanted to build a flat roofed home, this could effectively make the
Yes.
house taller.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see. Thank you.
Any other questions?
And that's a good question. So that really is where the planning commission needs to, have this public debate, whether it's in the best interest of the city or not. I'm not. It doesn't change my job any. I can enforce 30 feet as well as 35 feet. I'm just telling you some of the issues that we're running into. And so,
Commissioner Marchant.
I mean, 5 feet isn't really gonna allow them to build an extra story. So it's not like we're gonna have giant houses, even if it is a flat roof house, so I'm fine with it.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll go ahead and open this up for public hearing. Again, you'll be given 3 minutes if you wish to speak. Okay, we will bring it back and close the hearing and bring it back to the commission for comment and/or motion. Commissioner Quinney.
Based on the information and findings set forth in the staff report and upon the evidence and explanations received today, I move the planning commission forward a positive recommendation to the city council for this application.
Commissioner Marchant.
I second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, carries 7-0. And that is our last item on the agenda. Do I have another motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn.
You missed it.
It did happen.
The mayor was gone.
Sorry.
Number 2.
My apologies, go ahead.
Thumbs up.
Just as a reminder too, that there is going to be the joint council commission meeting in 2 weeks.
Yeah, is that Zoom only?
No,
It's here, isn't it?
no, Anna
is it in this room?
Yeah.
Oh, it's in person, not a Zoom.
Yeah, it's in person.
The information we were sent was a Zoom.
I think that
Was
was
that
an
a
option.
Zoom option? I think it was a
It
Zoom
was probably
option.
an option, but it didn't say what room otherwise to be in.
I'll clarify with the council office, but my understanding it was to be in person with the Zoom option. But leading up to that, it would be good if any of you had questions or hopeful expectations or outcomes from that discussion. We're going to be focused on the general plan, and obviously we'll have public hearings and the formality of that. But it's mainly geared towards just providing the commissioners an update of what we've done so far, give you a sneak preview of things to come, and then hopefully answer any questions. We've got 2 open houses later on this month.
Recording stopped.
So if you have any questions though leading up, just let me and Larry know, and we'll try to prep and prepare answers to questions you might have, so.
I think they're
That's it.
scheduled for this fall, like in October.
What's that?